I have a question for you, my Dorito Huffin consort. How much did you rely on parrying in your first Elden Ring playthrough? Give me, say, a percentage. Weifu, for instance, 0% because he didn't use shields. If your answer is over 70%, chances are you consider yourself a parry king, and you might have tried to test your might against other gamers in PvP. In that case, I have another question for you. Has this ever happened to you before?
Oh my God. Oh, hell no.
I'm very positive that your answer to that question is yes, and I'm pretty sure that your answer to my next question is also yes. Have you ever seen people pull out this? You may have noticed that the parry animation was executed way before the enemies attacked, and that they were seemingly stopped by an invisible force. There is a reason for this to happen, and it ties with my previous showcase of seemingly missed parries. So now I will explain to you how parries work in Elden Ring, and why this phenomenon that we just witnessed happens. I assume you are interested because, well, you clicked the video. But first, let's define what a parry is. Parrying is a combat mechanic in Elden Ring. Duh. You can parry many types of enemies, both in PvE and PvP. The way this works is that by performing a parry skill, which is tied to the shield or weapon you're using, you will stop an enemy attack and leave them in a vulnerable state. When they are in this state, you simply walk up to them and press your light attack button to perform a critical hit. Mind you, not every PvE enemy is left in a vulnerable state after a parry. Not every enemy in PvE is parryable, and not every weapon in PvP is parryable. It is also possible, logically, to make an oopsie and miss parries. The parry animation consists of two types of frames, regular frames and parry frames. A parry will only trigger when the enemy's attack lands between those parry frames. Parry too late or too early and the enemy will bonk you into oblivion. If they hit you during the non-parry frames portion of the animation, you will simply block the attack and receive huge stamina damage. There are many different parry skills in Elden Ring, each having a different functionality aside from the parrying part. For example, Carrion Retaliation allows you to parry spells and turn them against the enemy. But what's important to know is that both Golden Parry and Carrion Retaliation have the most parry frames of all the skills, so they are usually the best choices. Here's a simple demonstration. You walk up to an enemy, you press the parry button right before their attack connects to leave them vulnerable, which requires precise timing, and then as they beg for mercy, you banish them forever into the Shadow Realm. Pretty simple, right? You say yes, but since I am a witch, I can read your thoughts, you goober. I know what you're thinking. If it's so precise, how come you missed by a mile in the double parry clip and still managed to get it? To answer that question, let me explain to you what latency is first. Yes, you're going to learn with me, you dumb little Gorgonite. Latency is defined as the delay before a transfer of data begins following an instruction for its transfer.
What?
To put it in non-nerdy terms, it's how much time it takes for an action you perform to happen on screen. The further away your enemy is from your real-life physical location, the more ping they will have, and the more latency there will be. In low latency, usually the delay is not noticeable, and you can basically play as if there was no latency. But on high latency matches, the gameplay becomes much different. You may have noticed this when you hit an enemy in PvP. Your attack phases through them, and after a small time later, the action registers. That's the way in which latency is handled in Elden Ring. Some other games handle latency by giving you input delay, which is when you press a button and there's a delay between said button press and your character performing the action. And in Elden Ring's case, since the delay is not on your end, it has to be in your enemy's end, meaning that after you perform an action, it will take X amount of time to happen in the enemy's screen. In Elden Ring, some actions are registered locally, while other actions are registered non-locally. For example, dodge rolls are registered locally. When you roll, the iframes of the roll, which are from the start up to a certain point in the animation, are on your side, so you have to time your rolls on your screen. The latency, however, translates to phantom hits, which are attacks that hit you when they visually should not do it. This happens because in their screen, the enemy hit you, and in the time it took for the hit to register in your screen, you did not dodge. However, during high latency matches, the network system basically allows you to spam dodge and never get hit. This happens because in your enemy's screen, even if they hit you during the portion of the roll that doesn't have iframes, the hit will take so long to register that you can basically perform another roll. And the hit will register during your iframes portion of the roll, basically negating the damage. It is so bad that you can basically make yourself immortal. Notice how Waifu is inside the hitbox of the attack at all times and barely gets hit. Had he got hit properly, he would have died instantly. This does not happen with status effects, though. You can get inflicted with status effects during roll animation. In the case of parries, however, the action is registered non-locally, which means that you have to time them in your enemy's screen. And this can prove difficult, because in high latency, you basically have to guess when your enemy is going to attack, parry beforehand, and pray to the gods that you got the timing right. But as in everything in life, there is a catch. There are plenty of setups where the chances of an enemy attacking are much higher. Of course, you'd have to observe the monkey in his natural habitat first and try to understand his reactions. For instance, let's say that your enemy likes to mash out of hit stun. In that case, you attack them once, and then you perform a parry. Usually, it will prove to be a successful one. Maybe the enemy likes to attack after rolling. In that case, you force them to roll in some way, and just before they recover, you parry them, adjusting to latency, of course. You can always eyeball the amount of latency in your enemy after having attacked them once. But you also have a downloadable tool called Steam P2P, which tells you the latencies of the gamers connected to your current session. Knowing different kinds of setups and baits can help you in creating scenarios where it's safe to throw in a parry for those delicious style points. But sadly, that's all there is to it. Style points. Parrying in Elden Ring is simply not worth it. Depending on the scenario, the risks of a missed parry are much higher than the reward of a successful one. Because unless you're using the Misery-Cord dagger, which has the highest crit multiplier, parries simply don't deal enough damage. Or do they? Recent patch 1.10 update increased the damage of critical hits. Parries now do much more damage than before, and they can one-shot enemies more than ever before. Are they worth the hustle now, though? Well, sadly, not really. In PvE, beating the out of enemies and stance breaking them is the best way to play. And in PvP, many other offensive and defensive techniques are much safer and efficient than parrying. But don't let that discourage you from trying. Believe it or not, learning how to predict enemy behavior and actually force them into scenarios where you would like them to be is extremely useful for you.
Gotcha.
Learning to adapt to scenarios and try to make things go your way in a healthy, strategic manner will help you with real-life struggles.
So go ahead, Tarnished. Grab that crust pillow with the picture of your one-eyed maiden. Use it as a shield and go parry the world for me.
And no, before you ask, Tarnished, you can't parry the water droplets from the shower. So go take a bath, please.